421 complain. What are you doing? Can you afford to pay for damage to the phone? The staff in the post office was shocked when he saw Yuyan's actions. He hurriedly picked up the receiver and heaved a sigh of relief when he heard a normal sound coming from the other end. This phone was very expensive. This is the only place in our town that has a public phone. If it's broken, there's one less. That's right. Who is this? We usually have to queue during holidays. If there's one less, we'll have to wait even longer. Yuyan was startled by the other party's roar. When she heard everyone's complaints about her, she was embarrassed and angry. However, seeing that the other party had many people, she couldn't go against them. She could only stomp her feet and run out of the post office angrily before walking back to the village. At this moment, Yan Yin had been waiting in the lobby of the dormitory building for a long time already. When Yan Yin saw Yuyan, he immediately stood up and walked forward. Then, he handed the lunch box over with a smile. You went to get the transfer form, right? Seeing that you haven't returned until dinner time, I knew that you had to go to town, so I saved food for you. Yuyan was in a bad mood, so she naturally didn't treat Yan Yin amiably. Instead of taking the lunchbox, she entered the living room and sat on the bench. Seeing this, Yan Yin hurriedly sat down beside her and looked at Yuyan with concern. What's wrong? Did things not go well? After Yuyan gritted her teeth and pursed her lips, Yan Yin tactfully went to get a glass of water and placed it in Yuyan's hand. You must be tired after being out for so long. Drink some water and rest for a while. Yuyan took a few sips of water before catching her breath. Then, she told him about how she suspected that Zhao Lin had lost her remittance slip in order to curry favor with Yu Bing. She also complained about her adoptive parents and brother. I wonder what my parents are up to. No one answered their phones. When Yan Yin heard that Yuyan didn't get a single cent today, he couldn't help but complain to Yuyan. He wanted to coax Yuyan to buy a chicken, but now, his plans were ruined. Although his mind was racing, Yan Yin didn't dare to show it on his face and he comforted Yuyan softly, maybe your parents have something on. Try calling them tomorrow. When Yuyan heard that she had to go to town to make calls again tomorrow, she felt even more vexed. There was a phone in the village committee's office, but it was mainly used for docking work or very urgent matters. People like Yuyan were definitely not allowed to use it. Yuyan still had 3.5 yuan, which she had to spend on calls. Moreover, she had promised the others that she would return the money in September. This meant that she had to contact her family as soon as possible. She couldn't care less about her pride anymore, and she asked Yan Yin, "Can you lend me 2 yuan? I'll return it to you when my family sends the money over." Yan Yin was stunned. He had just received 10 yuan from his mother a few days ago and couldn't bear to spend it. When Yuyan saw Yan Yin's hesitant expression, she thought of what Cui Jin had said on the phone about buying a watch for Jiang Chun, and her expression turned ugly. Other people give their partners a watch without even batting an eye, but it's so difficult for me to borrow just 2 yuan from you. In that case, you don't have to lend it to me. Yuyan was so angry that she snatched the lunchbox from Yan Yin's hand and stood up to go upstairs. Yan Yin didn't dare to let Yuyan return to her room in anger, and he hurriedly stopped her before coaxing her carefully. After Yan Yin heaved a sigh, he took out 2 yuan from his pocket and handed it to Yuyan. You're my girlfriend, so how can I refuse to give you 2 yuan? I just want to save up more money and buy you a decent gift in the future. I'm not as rich as other people's boyfriends, but I also want to try my best to give you the best. When Yuyan heard this, she rolled her eyes at Yan Yin. Really? Yan Yin immediately swore. Of course it's true. After Yan Yin expressed his stance, Yuyan no longer fussed over the watch. As he watched Yuyan leave, Yan Yin rolled his eyes angrily. Yuyan even wanted a watch. If not for Yuyan's family's connections, would he have humbled himself to curry favor with her? Now, he didn't even get any benefits from Yuyan, yet Yuyan dared to ask for precious things like watches from him. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 422 material. Yan Yin secretly spat at Yuyan and scolded her for being short-sighted. He originally thought that the daughter of a rich family didn't value material goods, but he didn't expect her to be so materialistic. Yuyan ran to town for a few days in a row to make calls, but she still couldn't contact her adoptive parents. In the end, she found an old colleague who was very close to her adoptive parents. Only then did she find out that her adoptive parents had hurriedly applied for leave from the agency half a month ago. She didn't know where they went. Among the male intellectuals who had lent Yuyan money previously, 2 of them secretly discussed things amongst themselves and came to look for Yuyan. The 2 of them waited in the courtyard in front of the dormitory building. When they saw Yuyan, they hurriedly went forward. Yuyan, you said that you would return the money this month. Yu Yin looked at Zhao Wen and Wen Sun, who were standing in front of her, and hurriedly looked around. When she realized that no one was paying attention, she pulled the two of them to a corner. I'm sorry, my parents received an urgent assignment and went on a business trip. They didn't have time to transfer the money to me. I can only return it to you guys in a few days. After Zhao Wen and Wen Sun exchanged looks, Zhao Wen said, Yu Yin, we're a little short on money, so if it's inconvenient on your side, you can return half of it first. If Yu Yin returned the money now, she wouldn't even have a chance to make any calls next time. After thinking for a while, she planned to play the blame game. Yu Yin looked sad as she asked, don't you guys believe me? You know my family's background. How can I not pay back the money I owe? Then, she said nonchalantly, it's only a few dozen yuan, which was my pocket money for a month or two in the past. When my parents come back from their business trip and send the money over, I'll return it to you guys all at once. There'll be packages too. I'll give you guys some biscuits as interest. The reason the two young men agreed to lend money was mainly that Yu Yin usually gave everyone the impression that she wasn't short of money. Moreover, they were all young people from the city who were short of money, so Yu Yin might help them if they were in trouble. Moreover, when they heard that Yu Yin had promised to give him additional benefits, they were even more tempted. However, Zhao Wen was still a little worried, so he asked, when are your parents coming back from their business trip? This question stumped Yu Yin a little and she could only reply vaguely, probably this month. The two of them each lent 5 yuan to Yu Yin. This was a lot of money for them. When they heard this, they began to feel uneasy again. Wen Sun couldn't help but ask, can you confirm the time? We don't have any spare money on hand. If something happens, we really won't know what to do. Seeing that the other party wanted to get to the bottom of it, Yu Yin felt very unlucky. Why was Yu Bing with these poor people? She had only borrowed a few yuan, but now, she was being urged, as if she owed them her life. It was all Yu Bing's fault. If not for her, she wouldn't have ended up like this. Yu Yin lowered her eyes to hide the gloominess in them. After a moment, she looked up with a smile and an understanding expression on her face. I understand. We're all struggling. Don't worry, Yu Yin, am not someone who refuses to return the money I borrowed. The time for my parents' return hasn't been decided yet, but I'll definitely be able to return the money this month. Yu Yin thought about how her parents had never been away from home together in the past. This time might have been an emergency. Moreover, they had been gone for half a month. No matter what, there would be someone at home this month. In addition, the creditors were already urging her. At this moment, Yu Yin only wanted to calm them down and send them away, so she gave an affirmative answer. The two of them didn't say anything else and returned to the dormitory after saying goodbye to Yu Yin. Seeing that there were no outsiders in the courtyard, Yu Yin couldn't help but curse, Yu Bing, why don't you die? You're simply born to jinx me. You didn't give your family money, so I had to go around borrowing money. At this moment, Yu Yin still didn't realize that she was the one who insisted on currying favor with her biological parents. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 423 aren't meant to be close. Coincidentally, this scene was seen by Shuya again. Shuya wanted to plant potted flowers in her room recently, so she went to the villagers to ask for a few flower seeds today. Then, she went to town to buy a flower pot and shoveled the soil behind the osmanthus tree in the courtyard. Unexpectedly, just as she dug up more than half a basin and was about to get up and return to the dormitory, she heard the three of them talking. Being urged to return money wasn't an honorable thing. Moreover, she hadn't lent Yu Yin money. In order to avoid an awkward situation, she could only squat back down. It was only after Yu Yin left that she walked out from behind the tree with the basin. In the afternoon, Shuya went to the factory area to report the contents of the September night school to Yu Bing. When Yu Bing saw that Shuya was looking for her, she smiled. You came at the right time. I was about to look for you. When Shuya heard this, she smiled and went forward to ask, is it the packaging designed for the double holidays? Yu Bing pursed her lips and smiled. That's right. Last month, flour started to get rationed, so we didn't dare to go to the agency to get orders. Now that it's been canceled, we have to snatch customers quickly. In Yu Bing's memory, there was no war this year. However, because there was no food factory in the village at this time in her previous life, a month of temporary rationing didn't affect the lives of the residents and Yu Bing didn't know about the rationing. Out of caution, she was in no hurry to snatch the agency's gift order. This matter also gave Yu Bing inspiration. She had to produce more raw materials that were not easy to regulate. Otherwise, if she encountered such a situation again, not many products in their food factory could compete with those of other large food factories. Shuya had been trying to get creative inspiration since last month. Now that Yu Bing suddenly mentioned it, she was prepared. I already have some inspiration, but I keep feeling that there's something missing. However, I can design it for you in the next 2 days. After the two of them chatted about the design direction and theme innovations this time, Shuya felt enlightened. This was also why she liked to chat with Yu Bing. Yu Bing looked young, but Shuya knew that she was forward-looking and open-minded. Shuya admired this girl who was a few years younger than her. Thinking of Yu Yan's vicious curses when she mentioned Yu Bing in the afternoon, Shuya looked at Yu Bing with a hint of worry. She was a little hesitant about telling her what she had seen previously. Yu Bing senses Shuya's strange gaze and thought that it was about work, so she smiled and said, "We're already so familiar with each other. If you have any thoughts, just mention them. There's nothing to be embarrassed about." Previously, the two of them were not very familiar with each other, so there were some things that Shuya didn't say. However, this time, she saw Yu Yan's malicious intent towards Yu Bing with her own eyes, so she decided to tell her everything she knew. Yu Bing was a little surprised. Yu Yan had reunited with her family much earlier than in her previous life. In Shuya's opinion, Yu Bing's surprise was due to her sister's sudden appearance and her sister's inexplicable malice towards her. Shuya patted Yu Bing's shoulder. "Don't be so sad. Some siblings just aren't meant to be close. You have to be more careful." Yu Bing came back to her senses and nodded with a smile as she said, "I'm fine. Don't worry." Yu Bing's response was truthful. She didn't care what that family did. However, in Shuya's eyes, this seemed like a forced smile. After all, in her opinion, Yu Bing's family hid such a shocking secret, so how could Yu Bing accept it so quickly? Shuya wanted to give Yu Bing more personal space to calm down, so she stood up and left. Yu Yan and the Yu family thought that they had hidden the matter perfectly, but they didn't expect Yu Bing to already know about everything. In the next few days, a few more people came to ask Yu Yan about the repayment, but they were all temporarily appeased by Yu Yan in the same way. On the other side, Madame Sun finally couldn't hold back her urge to cause trouble. Madame Sun lay on the bed and held her waist as she wailed, "My waist will be crippled if this continues." As Sun was squatted on the ground, he took out a bottle of medicinal wine from the corner and helped Madame Sun massage her waist. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 424 Vampire. Damn Wenqin. She really screwed me over. Be gentle. You idiot. Do you want to kill me? In the past, when Wenqin was around, these were all Wenqin's tasks. Now, it was Sun turn, but he didn't have a good grasp. However, Madame Sun didn't have anyone else to order around now, so she could only curse and shout in pain to vent her dissatisfaction. Sun softened his actions and asked blankly, "Mom, what should we do about my wife? Are we really gonna get a divorce?" After a few minutes, Sun finally managed to massage Madame Sun with the strength that she was satisfied with. Madame Sun closed her eyes as she enjoyed the massage in comfort. Only then did she reply to her son's question, "Useless thing. You're still thinking about that B*TCH now. She has never thought about you for even a second. You two definitely have to get a divorce. That woman can't be controlled at all now. But don't worry, I won't let you be without a woman." When Sun heard this, although he was a little reluctant, he was still tempted by his mother's words. "Mom, last time, you said that you would find an obedient woman from the mountains for me to marry. Can you find someone as beautiful as Wenqin?" When Madame Sun heard this, she snorted. "You're the same as your father, who died early. You only know how to find good-looking people. Can good-looking people put food on the table? I found a city dweller for you this time, a rich city dweller." Sun frowned. When did the plan change? However, it wasn't bad if she was a young woman from the city. No matter what, city dwellers were more special than the women from the mountains. Their skin was delicate and flawless. Just thinking about it made him excited. He asked with interest, "Mom, who are you going to find for me? There are 2 young women in our village who seem to be from well-off families." Madame Sun thought of the 2 young women from the same village and smiled nonchalantly. "I found them for you from the He Mountain village. You've seen them before." Sun had only been there once. After thinking for a long time, he still didn't know who the daughter-in-law Madame Sun mentioned was. Madame Sun stopped beating around the bush. "It's Wenqin's supervisor, Yu Bing." When Sun heard the name from Madame Sun's mouth, his expression froze. The 2 times Yu Bing caused trouble made him a little afraid. "Mom, why don't we forget it? It's better to look for someone from the village. Most importantly, they're more obedient." When Madame Sun saw Sun's cowardly expression, she was furious and she slapped her son's arm fiercely. "What do you know? You're such an idiot. If I weren't around, you wouldn't have been able to survive. I've already asked around. Yu Bing has many jobs. The factory director gets a salary. She's the tractor chauffeur in the village, so she gets another salary for it. Her chauffeur position is registered in the commune, so she gets a salary and employee benefits as well. Sungwa was blind and weak. Ever since when Chin married into the Sun family, Madam Sun had been living an easy life for a few years, since there was someone to do chores and support the family. She and her son just had to earn some work points to fill their stomachs. After when Jean entered the food factory, their lives improved. Madam Sun was used to freeloading off others and didn't want to work herself. With Wen Qin no longer under control, she could only look at the next daughter-in-law candidate. When Sun Guo heard Madam Sun's description, he was a little tempted. His mother was already old and could only earn limited work points, let alone him. If they didn't find someone to order around, their family wouldn't be able to survive. Madam Sun continued, speaking of which, I'm also angry. I saw that she was quite smart the last 2 times, but I didn't expect her to be so stupid. Isn't you being busy with the food factory? The people driving now are all her disciples. She actually gave all the chauffeurs' salaries to her disciples. Fortunately, her disciples were also stupid and left the daily employee benefits of the commune's employees to her. Sun Guo wasn't smart, but he knew that he couldn't let others take advantage of him. When he heard this, he felt a sense of sympathy. Mom, when I marry her, I'll definitely let her get her salary back. Otherwise, I'll beat her to death. What a prodigal woman. Seeing that her son regained his usual attitude towards Wen Qin, Madam Sun nodded in satisfaction. That's more like my son. If a daughter-in-law is disobedient, she has to be taught a lesson until she's obedient. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 425 Creating Opportunities. Sun Guo also liked to see women being beaten, scolded, and begged. Every time this happened, he would feel a strange sense of satisfaction, making him feel a sense of ego inflation. Sun Guo thought of the 2 times he had met Yu Bing. The other party had always ignored him and even looked down on him. Thinking of this, the violence in his heart stirred. He couldn't wait to see Yu Bing's helpless expression when she was pressed under him. The more Sun Guo thought about it, the more excited he became. Mom, how can we get Yu Bing to agree to marry me? Even those letters from overseas are useless. What else can we do? The Sun family didn't know that their country and America had resumed diplomatic relations, but that didn't mean that they were on good terms with every country internationally at this stage. They still had tense relationships with some. As long as the communication was found, it would be fatal. However, to people who had never even been to the city before, other than their own country, the outside world was collectively considered foreign. They didn't know that there were more than 200 foreign countries. At this moment, less than a third of the foreign countries had diplomatic relations with theirs. However, it was useless even if they knew, because Yu Bing didn't have such evidence for them to catch. After thinking about it, Madam Sun could only think of a method that had been used for thousands of years. Rape her. Sun Guo suddenly became smarter this time. Mom, Yu Bing helped a lot with Wen Qin's divorce. Even if Yu Bing marries me, we can't control her. At that time, won't she have the final say? What if she learns from Wen Qin and wants a divorce too? At that time, I won't have a wife anymore. When Madam Sun heard this, she couldn't help but glare at her son. If you hadn't thought that you were so smart and deliberately made Xiao Wei sick, would you have angered Wen Qin? You have no self-control. So what if she really has another man? If she really dares to cheat on you, she'll be the one at fault. At that time, we'll have a better way to control her. During the time when Qin was gone, I finally understood that pride is not as important as loyalty. When Sun Guo thought of his abstinence for the past 2 months, he felt that being cheated on wasn't that unbearable. As long as he found out in time and taught her a lesson, he would have new dirt to use against her. Then, he would be at ease. After figuring this out, Sun Guo agreed with Madam Sun. Seeing this, Madam Sun continued, women will always have special feelings for their first man. I'll create an opportunity for you. It's best if you sleep with Yu Bing a few more times. You have to get her pregnant. Only by getting her pregnant will we have authority. At that time, she'll probably be the one begging you to marry her. Otherwise, who else can she marry? Madam Sun planned to use the most precious chastity of this era to control Yu Bing. Many women didn't dare to say anything when they encountered rape. They would either devote themselves to the man who raped them or quickly find a reliable man to marry. They would think of a way to fool him on their wedding night and make him think that it was her first time. In order to prevent Yu Bing from choosing the second path, Madam Sun emphasized that Yu Bing had to be impregnated. As long as she was pregnant, it wouldn't be so easy for Yu Bing to get an abortion. The hospital wouldn't agree to a pregnant woman's miscarriage without the signature of a family member. If she tried to get an abortion herself and anything unexpected happened, she might lose her right to be a mother. If it was serious, she might even lose her life. Madam Sun didn't think Yu Bing had the guts to do so. The mother and son didn't consider the fact that Yu Bing could call the police. In this era, even if they knew that the woman was a victim, once such a thing happened, only the woman would be criticized and gossiped about. Malicious gossip was even more hurtful than physical abuse. The latter was a physical wound, while the former was a psychological injury. In this conservative era, a woman's life would be ruined in this situation. Therefore, when faced with such a situation, many people could only swallow their anger. It wasn't easy for Madam Sun and Sun Gua to wait until their day off. Then, they carried 10 pounds of sweet potatoes to Yi Mountain Village early in the morning. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 426 Can't Remarry. Yi Mountain Village. During her time in Yi Mountain Village, Madam Sun had already figured out the roads in the village, so she arrived at Wen Qing's house with familiarity. After knocking on Wen Qing's door, Madam Sun smiled as she pulled Wen Qing's hand. Seeing this, Wen Qing pulled her hand back without hesitation. Wen Qing knew what they were like, so she looked at the Sun family's mother and son warily. When Madam Sun saw that Wen Qing wasn't falling for it, her expression froze. However, she quickly regained her smile, as if the awkward scene had never happened. Wen Qing, the sweet potatoes planted at home are ripe. Sun Gua misses you and Xiao Hui, so he specifically sent some over. Sun Gua hurriedly raised the sack containing the sweet potatoes in his hand for Wen Qing to see and echoed, "Yes, yes, yes. I haven't seen you and my son for a long time, so I wanted to come and see you guys." If they were just visiting the child, Wen Qing naturally wouldn't stop them. After she looked at the two of them, she finally turned around to let them into the house. The two of them were overjoyed when they saw this scene. After they walked through the courtyard, they saw Xiao Hui eating breakfast. Ever since the last argument, Madam Sun had not seen Sun Hui for a while, so she missed him very much. The moment she saw him, she immediately called him. Xiao Hui also put down his bowl and chopsticks as he greeted his father and grandma. Madam Sun carried her grandson, but she kept looking at the table, since she wanted to know what Wen Qing had made for breakfast. Wen Qing had learned her lesson, so she pretended not to see Madam Sun's gaze. After she looked at the remaining half of the corn cake in Xiao Hui's bowl, she quickly put it into the kitchen. She had no intention of being polite to the Sun family. She was certain that if she dared to ask them if they had eaten breakfast, the mother and son would really dare to ask for food. She still had to save money to give birth. She didn't have that much money to feed two healthy people. Madam Sun had already cursed Wen Qing inwardly. She had deliberately come over early this morning without eating because she wanted to freeload, but she didn't expect Wen Qing to have learned her lesson. However, at the thought that there was something more important today, Madam Sun suppressed her anger and continued to pretend to be a kind grandma. During this period of time, Sun Gua was already used to being hungry, so he didn't mind. For a moment, the atmosphere was quite harmonious. When Wen Qing saw that the Sun family's mother and son were talking to Xiao Hui, she didn't pay much attention to them. She picked up the tattered clothes that Yu Bing had helped her find and began to change them to the size of a newborn's. Madam Sun sat for a while. When she saw that Wen Qing had let down her guard, she gave Sun Gua a look. Sun Gua licked his lips and looked at Wen Qing. "Wen Qing, I agree to the divorce. Go to court and withdraw the lawsuit." Wen Qing, who was focused on making clothes, paused when she heard this and looked up at Sun Gua in surprise. "Why did you suddenly agree to a divorce?" Sun Gua repeated what Madam Sun had taught him, "We're husband and wife after all. The older one is sensible now, and the younger one is still in your stomach. We were husband and wife, so I don't want to fight in court with you. Otherwise, how can the two children stay in the village in the future?" Sun Gua's words were quite sincere, but Wen Qing felt that it wasn't something Sun Gua could think of. However, on second thought, no matter what, this was a good thing for her. She wanted to set off firecrackers to celebrate if she could get a divorce even a minute earlier. "When are we going to get a divorce?" Seeing this, Madam Sun knew that it was time for her to speak up. "Wen Qing, with my way of doing things, I definitely would have fought this lawsuit to the end with you. I couldn't watch my grandson lose a complete family," but Sun Gua's heart softened. He felt that even if it was for the sake of the child, the two of you couldn't go that far. He persuaded me for a long time before I finally agreed today. Wen Qing looked at Sun Gua in disbelief. Madam Sun continued, "However, I have one last request. After the divorce, you can take care of the two children, but you can't marry again in this lifetime. If there's any violation, Xiao Hui's custody will belong to the Sun family." Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 427 See the Witness. Wen Qing had no intention of getting married again, so this request wasn't difficult for her at all. "No problem. I agree to this request." Madam Sun didn't expect Wen Qing to agree so easily. Wen Qin was only 30 years old. Although she looked old and haggard from years of hard work, it was definitely not a problem for her to find an older man. Therefore, Madame Sun expected that Wen Qin would definitely disagree. Then, the two sides would start an intense dispute over this matter. She could take the opportunity to ask Yu Bing to be the mediator. Because of the country's special social system, as long as people with work agencies didn't break the law, they would mostly look for the other party's supervisor to be the mediator. Therefore, Madame Sun's idea wasn't abnormal. However, Madame Sun didn't expect Wen Qin to be so cooperative, so she was stunned. You agreed just like that? Wen Qin looked at Madame Sun in confusion. Didn't you ask for this? Aren't you happy that I agreed? Madame Sun opened and closed her mouth a few times. Her mind raced as she thought of a way to respond. She sized up Wen Qin suspiciously. Since you agreed so easily, are you up to something? Wen Qin looked at Madame Sun and Sun Gu angrily. Then what do you guys think I should do? Seeing this, Madame Sun said, let's write an agreement. Call the leader of your factory over as a witness. Under normal circumstances, there would be no problem with these words, but what was Madame Sun's relationship with Yu Bing? Yu Bing was the person who had sent her to the police station for detention, so they should be at odds. Therefore, Wen Qin immediately sensed that something was wrong. She had been in the Sun family for about 10 years, so she knew the Sun family's mother and son too well. Yu Bing would help her, so it was odd for Madame Sun to look for Yu Bing. Wen Qin didn't know what the two people in front of her were up to, but she was already very certain that Madame Sun had brought Sun Gu here not for a divorce, but for revenge, so she couldn't look for Yu Bing. Since they weren't to discuss the divorce, there was nothing for them to talk about. Wen Qin couldn't be bothered to feign civility with them. She stood up and said, I don't think there's a need to talk about it anymore. Let's wait for the court's verdict. When the time comes, if you guys feel indignant, you guys can make a fuss. I'm not afraid of confronting you guys in the court, since I'm already mentally prepared. You guys can leave now. Upon hearing this, Madame Sun widened her eyes in surprise. She had only made that suggestion just now, so if she didn't agree, she could just say so. Did she have to chase them out directly? Moreover, Wen Qin didn't do what they expected, so how could they continue their plan? Madame Sun was annoyed that her plan had been disrupted twice. Now that she saw Wen Qin's uncooperative attitude, she was furious. Wen Qin, I think you're too big for your britches. As long as the court doesn't hand down the verdict, you'll still be the daughter-in-law of our family. If I ask you to call Yu Bing over, you have to call her over immediately. Madame Sun panicked and revealed her ultimate goal in a fit of anger. Wen Qin sneered. I was wondering why you were so easygoing today. You can't help but let the cat out of the bag now, right? Hurry up and leave. Don't force me to chase you away. Seeing this, Madame Sun knew that Wen Qin definitely wouldn't call Yu Bing over, so she turned around and said to Sun Hui, who was standing at the side and watching them argue, Xiao Hui, find Yu Bing and tell her to come over as a witness to the divorce agreement. Wen Qin stopped him. Xiao Hui, don't go. Madame Sun quickly pushed Sun Hui out. Wen Qin wanted to stop her, but Sun Gu hugged her and stopped her. Although Sun Gu couldn't exert much strength with one hand, he was a man after all, so Wen Qin couldn't break free for the moment. Sun Gu, let go of me. What do you want? At this moment, Madame Sun had already brought Sun Hui out of the courtyard. When Sun Hui heard his mother's cry, he was so worried that he wanted to turn around, but he was grabbed by Madame Sun and couldn't leave. Madame Sun bent down and coaxed Sun Hui, Xiao Hui, do you want your mother to be fine? Sun Hui nodded vigorously. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 428 Good day. Madame Sun smiled kindly. If Yu Bing comes to resolve the matter, your mother will be fine, so when you look for Yu Bing later, tell her that your mother asked you to go. Sun Hui frowned. Wasn't this a lie? His mother didn't agree at all. Seeing this, Madame Sun coaxed him again, Xiao Hui, be good. I will buy you candy after this matter is resolved. With that, she pushed Xiao Hui forward. Sun Hui looked at his grandma, who was blocking the door, and could only turn around and leave the house helplessly. Madame Sun watched as Sun Hui walk towards Yu Bing's house and revealed a smug smile. After Madame Sun rubbed her palms together a few times, she turned around to enter the courtyard with a smile. Only then did she see her son standing in front of the living room's door with a pale face. Madame Sun went forward in confusion. Why did you come out? Where's that B*TCH? When Sun Gu heard his mother's question, his lips trembled a few times, but in the end, he only made a sound the size of a mosquito. Mom. When Madame Sun saw Sun Gu's pale lips and panicked expression, she had a bad feeling. Madame Sun walked past Sun Gu and into the living room. She saw Wen Qin lying on the ground with a brick stained with blood beside her. Her head was covered in blood, and a lot of it had even flowed onto the yellow mud floor below her. Madame Sun was shocked by this scene and let out a low cry. Ah! However, Madame Sun had killed people before, so she quickly calmed down. When she went forward to check Wen Qin's breathing, she realized that she didn't feel any breath on her finger. At this moment, Sun Wu followed her into the house. Seeing that Madame Sun was silent, he went forward timidly and asked, "Mom, how is Wen Qin?" Madame Sun looked up at Sun Gu and said slowly, "She's dead." Madame Sun's eyes looked calm, as if Wen Qin's life wasn't worth her worrying about. Sun Gu was flustered and his voice was quivering as he said, "Mom, what should we do?" "Save me." Madame Sun stood up calmly and walked to Sun Gu. Then, she raised her hand and slapped Sun Gu hard on the face as she scolded in a low voice, "Calm down. Are you afraid that others won't know what you did? What happened?" Sun Gu came back to his senses after being slapped. He took a deep breath and said, "She kept struggling to run out, so I was anxious. When I saw a brick at the foot of the table, I didn't think too much about it and pulled it out. I just wanted to knock her out. I didn't want her dead." When Madame Sun heard this, she glared at Sun Gu. "You're so incompetent." At this point, there was no time to pursue the matter. Madame Sun only scolded him in a fit of anger. Most importantly, she had to deal with this matter quickly. Madame Sun quickly scanned the room with her small eyes and saw the standing closet against the wall. Then, she walked over and opened it. When she saw that the space inside was very large, she ordered Sun Gu, "Drag that B***tch in." Sun Gu wasn't an assertive person to begin with, and he had been slapped by Madame Sunday. Now, he did whatever Madame Sun asked him to do. After Wen Qin was dragged into the cabinet, Madame Sun found a shovel and asked Sun Gu to dig out the soil that had seeped into the blood. Then, she flipped the clean soil over to cover the traces. After everything was settled, Sun Gu looked around in fear. He kept feeling that Wen Qin's ghost was staring at him, and he said with a trembling voice, "Mom, let's run away now." "I'm afraid." Madame Sun sneered. "Do you think we can get away with it by leaving now? Don't forget, Xiao Hui knows that we were here. Moreover, he's already gone to look for Yu Bing." Sun Gu paused when he heard this and said uncertainly, "I'm his father. How can he dare to report me to outsiders?" Madame Sun rolled her eyes at her son. "If Yu Bing finds the corpse in the closet and Xiao Hui is coaxed by that woman, won't he tell her everything? Not only can't we leave now, but we have to continue our plan. We have to drag Yu Bing into this. After you rape her, we'll let her follow us to bury Wen Qin at night. As long as Yu Bing doesn't call the police, as her family, we can say that Wen Qin ran away with someone, and the others won't interfere. Wouldn't this matter be over without anyone knowing? We can also use it to control Yu Bing at the same time. We have nothing to lose, but she's richer and more powerful than us. As long as she wants to keep everything she has now, she has to listen to us obediently. With her salary and work points, our good days are coming. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 429 help if you can." Sun Gu was convinced by his mother. The more he listened, the more excited he became. He had completely forgotten about the panic he felt just now. "Mom, I'll listen to you." On the other side, Sun Hui had already jogged to Yu Bing's house. "Sister Yu Bing." Seeing that the sun was shining today, Yu Bing took advantage of her day off to wash her hair in the courtyard. Now, she was bending down to dry her hair. "Xiao Hui?" Sun Hui ran to Yu Bing's side and looked at her anxiously. "Sister Yu Bing, can you go to my house? My grandma asked me to look for you as a witness to the divorce." Sun Hui didn't lie according to Madame Sun's request. When Yu Bing heard this, she was as incredulous as Wen Qin. "Looking for me?" When Yu Bing saw Sun Hui nod, she frowned. "Your grandma agreed to your parents' divorce? Then what did your mother say?" Sun Hui thought for a moment and replied helplessly, "My mother didn't want me to look for you, but my grandma pulled me out and insisted that I come over." When Jiang Chun heard this in the kitchen, she stuck her head out of the window. Madame Sun must be up to no good again. "Little Bing, don't go. She might have thought of some disgusting method to set you up again." Yu Bing quickly dried her hair. "I'd better go. If it can be resolved smoothly, Wen Qin can also relax and recuperate." It wasn't easy for Wen Qin to take care of a child while she was pregnant, so Yu Bing wanted to see if she could deal with the Sun family once and for all. They could either quickly go through the procedures for the divorce or wait for the court's verdict quietly. If they came every few days, when would it end? Yu Bing lowered her head and said to Sun Hui, "Xiao Hui, stay here and play with Xiao Hu and sister Jiang Chun later. I'll go look for your mother." Sun Hui thought of his mother's words before he went out. Sister Yu Bing, I'm worried about my mother. I want to go back and see her. Yu Bing stopped what she was doing. Did your father hit your mother again? Sun Hui lowered his head in sadness. Although he only heard sounds, based on his many years of experience, Sun Hui felt that his father must have hit her again. Yu Bing slapped the towel in her hand on the shelf beside her. Bastard! Is he even a man? Jiang Chun frowned when she heard this. She knew that Yu Bing had made up her mind, so she helped Yu Bing persuade Sun Hui. Xiao Hui, with Yu Bing around, your grandma and father can't bully your mother. If you go with them, they will have to divert their attention to take care of you. Sun Hui was very worried, but he knew that they were right, so he didn't insist on following them. Yu Bing quickly combed her half-dried hair with her hand and tied her hair into a low ponytail. Then, she entered the house and took her dagger. After the scabbard disappeared last time, Xiaoxing made a scabbard out of wood and put it on. He even engraved Yu Bing's name on it. After Yu Bing left, she quickly walked to Wenqing's house. When she entered the courtyard, she stopped and shouted into the open room, Wenqing. The Sun family's mother and son were discussing how to deal with Yu Bing. When they heard her voice, Madame Sun immediately appeared in the middle of the living room opposite the courtyard door. When she saw that Yu Bing was alone, she asked, Why are you alone? Where's Xiao Hui? Yu Bing didn't say that Xiao Hui was at her house, since she was worried that the two of them would take him away. Xiao Hui met a classmate halfway and went to play with him. Madame Sun was overjoyed. Now, she didn't have to worry about anything. She deliberately looked behind Yu Bing and said, Wenqing saw that you hadn't come out for too long and ran to look for you. Didn't you see her? Madame Sun was worried that Yu Bing would be suspicious if she didn't see Wenqing, so she found an excuse. Yu Bing frowned when she heard this. According to Sun Hui, Wenqing didn't want her to come at all. If she left the house, she would definitely stop her from coming, which would be against Madame Sun's wishes. Yu Bing determined that Madame Sun was definitely lying and deliberately said, Then I'll wait for her in the courtyard. How could they do it in the courtyard? Madame Sun was a little anxious. Miss Yu, come in and wait. Who knows when she'll return? Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 430 maintenance. Yu Bing glanced at Madame Sun as she continued aloofly, Won't she come back if she can't find me at my house? It'll just be a few minutes. Madame Sun pursed her lips. She couldn't say that Wenqing would never come back. Moreover, Madame Sun knew that Yu Bing wasn't easy to deal with and she didn't get to use the excuse she came up with beforehand, so she could only enter the living room. When she saw her son standing at the side in a daze, she was furious and rolled her eyes at Sun Gua. Then, she saw the pen and paper Wenqing had placed by the bed. Madame Sun had an idea. Soon, she appeared in front of Yu Bing with a smile and told her about the agreement. Why don't you go into the house and write it first? When you're done, Wenqing will probably be back. Let's confirm it quickly so that we can settle the procedures. Such straightforwardness was really unlike Madame Sunday. Yu Bing sneered inwardly, but she revealed a smile on the surface. All right, but I have to go to the bathroom first. I'll go in and write later. After a few minutes, Yu Bing came out and saw that Madame Sun was still waiting in the courtyard. She pretended not to care and entered the living room. After Yu Bing entered the house and sized up her surroundings, she realized that there was indeed only the Sun family. Then, she sat down at the table without thinking much about it. As soon as Yu Bing placed her hand on the table that had lost its brick swayed and she couldn't write at all. After Yu Bing looked down and realized that the brick she had found when she came to help clean up the house was gone, she was a little puzzled and muttered to herself, Why did she take off the brick? When the Sun family's mother and son, who were sitting at the other end of the table, heard this, their hearts jumped to their throats, but Madame Sun maintained her composure. However, Sun Guo was extremely nervous. When he saw the kettle on the table, he wanted to take a few sips to calm himself down, so he raised it and wanted to pour a glass of water. However, he didn't expect his hand to tremble so much that the water was poured out of the cup. This scene stunned Yu Bing. Madame Sun hurriedly snatched the kettle over and filled the cup. Then, she smiled at Yu Bing and said, Sun Gua has a slight fever today. He's not in a good state. Madame Sun secretly glared at her son. Sun Gua lowered his head and picked up the water to finish it. After that, he didn't dare to move again. This excuse was quite good, but since it came from Madame Sun, Yu Bing didn't believe it at all. At the same time, she felt even more uneasy. As she wrote the divorce agreement, she recalled the strange actions of the Sun family's mother and son after entering the house. Yu Bing recalled Sun Gua's strong reaction when she lifted the brick. Yu Bing began to ponder over it, but her hands didn't stop moving. The divorce agreement was written in less than a minute. Then, Yu Bing smelled a fishy scent. After she handed the agreement to the Sun family's mother and son, she looked around to see where the smell came from. Like her, Wen was very clean and would never let such a smell appear in the room. Madam Sun couldn't read, but Sunwo could. Hence, Sunwo read it to Madam Sunday. When the two of them saw Yu Bing looking around absent-mindedly, they felt extremely uneasy. After Madam Sun gave Sunwo a look, Sunwo swallowed hard and nodded. Then, he stood up quietly and went to the side. Madam Sun handed the agreement back. Yu Bing, I have to add another rule. Yu Bing was looking at a few dark red dots on the ground not far away. When she heard Madam Sun's words, she came back to her senses. Add what? Madam Sun made a request without hesitation. Wen has to give me alimony. Yu Bing glared at Madam Sunday. You're crazy about money. Wen isn't your daughter. What right do you have to ask her for alimony? Madam Sun didn't listen at all and kept trying to divert Yu Bing's attention. Sunwo took this opportunity to go behind Yu Bing and take out a handkerchief soaked in knockout powder to cover Yu Bing's mouth and nose. Yu Bing reacted quickly and held her breath. Then, she quickly took out a handful of quicklime soil from her pocket and threw it towards Sunwo's eyes. She had already closed her eyes and covered her face with her other arm. This series of actions only took 2 seconds. Before Sunwo could react, Yu Bing threw it towards Sunwo's eyes. Ah! Sunwo covered his eyes and shouted, Mom! My eyes hurt. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much.